I wrote a children's book. I have two of them. I've got one specifically on reincarnation, and then one just kind of on the meaning of life. And, one of the verses I like, it says, we decide on our lessons, the paths we will take, awards we might go for, and mistakes we might make. For life isn't easy and not always fun, but easy is boring, like games always won. So we set up our challenges and mountains so high to test our endurance and reach for the sky. It doesn't much matter if we get to the top. What matters much more is what we do when we stop. Process. Sometimes you're sitting down to write and it just comes to you. And you may be thinking it's fiction and it turns to be something more real than that, which is part of the story I was going to tell you. And it's also, that sometimes nonfiction, you feel like you have to prove something. And with fiction, you can just be free and then let those portals open up and tell you what to say. So for me, it's a really interesting thing. My first book was The 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen, and nonfiction. And it was very left brain, linear. Okay, what are the 5? Now I was meditating to get guidance, but it's not the same thing as just the creative flow, as you know, from writing fiction. So it wasn't until a few years after that I thought, I never thought I could write fiction. And now, of course, I love it. So it's just a little different. Like you just kind of get in a flow of fiction sometimes, and it just comes through you. And that's what I was going to tell you. The story that you mentioned is called The End, A Love Story to the Universe, and it's free to everybody, just so you know. And it's a story I wrote this year, and I'm thinking I'm writing it as fiction. I'm creating characters, and I'm writing it from the point of view, and I think you'll like this, from the point of view of what I call the upstairs, right? That there is a team up here, and I was writing, and I'm thinking I'm writing characters, and all of a sudden I'm realizing, no, they're telling me what to write. This is real. These forces, these characters, these traffic angels and guides, and these spirits, or whatever you want to call them, are telling me who they are, and they're writing themselves through me. So that was kind of like, I don't know, is it fiction, nonfiction? All I know is that they were telling me what they wanted me to do and explaining the story to me. And it started blending and blurring those lines between fiction and nonfiction. And I just kind of went with the flow.
I think that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Brownell, because, that feeling of knowing that you are being guided, you are being supported, that you've got, you're not doing this alone. That's a very interesting process, because sometimes it could lead to us having a block because we are not sure. It seems that it's an unknown place. Welcome to the Daily Soul Bytes Show. I am your host, Bola Abimbola, frequency alchemist, spiritual teacher, and author. Daily Soul Bytes Show is where we interview guests who are authors, coaches, and entrepreneurs from the fields of spirituality, psychology, and leadership, who share their insights for the expansion of collective consciousness. And today I have a very special guest, Brownell Landrum, all the way from Atlanta, though she travels around, and she'll tell us all about that. Welcome to the show, Brownell.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat it up with you today.
Oh, so am I. I'll read a bit about your bio, Brownell. Brownell Landrum is an author, inventor, songwriter, and explorer of metaphysical mysteries. In addition to being the host and executive producer of the Life is a Trip Reincarnation Stories Podcast, and the author of The End and the upcoming We Meet Again trilogy, she's the author of over a dozen books and screenplays ranging from nonfiction, 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen, to fiction, the DUET stories, novel series, children's books, and more. Beautiful. Thank you, Brownell. It's really nice for you to join me today, because I think writing is such a powerful, creative entity on its own. And there is such a process that is involved in writing. I think, because there's a lot of resistance we sometimes face for some reason. Because I've published, Daily Soul Bytes, and it's a journey, because sometimes we give the messages in the book, and then the messages somehow, as we promote and as we share, we deepen our own understanding of what we have written, and it almost seems as if sometimes the actual content, the words, have come from elsewhere sometimes.
Oh, I can tell you about that. I know exactly. I know exactly. In fact, one of my favorite quotes is a Bob Dylan quote, and he says, like, the song was there before I came around. I just had the pen and wrote it down. You
Yes,
know,
yes.
and
It's
so somewhere these thoughts are these energies, and if you want me, I can tell you a story about that.
yes, yes. Well, I do. Before we go into that, I
Yeah.
do want to just talk about this process of writing. How your, especially the nonfiction. I think the nonfiction stories, and I love that you do both. I do love that you do both. But the nonfiction stories, I think, take another. Well, actually, tell us the difference between writing a nonfiction and a fiction story from your perspective in terms of the creative process.
Yeah, there's a couple of different answers to that. One is, as you mentioned, I have a podcast, and one of the things, it's called Life is a Trip, Reincarnation and Afterlife, and Metaphysical podcast. And I always tell people that are submitting stories to that, which I hope you will too, is that they can be fictional or factual. So, because sometimes, we were talking about the writing process, sometimes you're sitting down to write and it just comes to you. And you may be thinking it's fiction and it turns to be something more real than that, which is part of the story I was going to tell you. And it's also, that sometimes nonfiction, you feel like you have to prove something. And with fiction, you can just be free and then let those portals open up and tell you what to say. So for me, it's a really interesting thing. My first book was The 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen, and nonfiction. And it was very left brain, linear. Okay, what are the 5? Now I was meditating to get guidance, but it's not the same thing as just the creative flow, as you know, from writing fiction. So it wasn't until a few years after that I thought, I never thought I could write fiction. And now, of course, I love it. So it's just a little different. Like, you just kind of get in a flow of fiction sometimes, and it just comes through you. And that's what I was going to tell you. The story that you mentioned is called The End, A Love Story to the Universe, and it's free to everybody, just so you know. And it's a story I wrote this year, and I'm thinking I'm writing it as fiction. I'm creating characters, and I'm writing it, but from the point of view, and I think you'll like this, from the point of view of what I call the upstairs, right? That there is a team up here, and I was writing, and I'm thinking I'm writing characters, and all of a sudden I'm realizing, no, they're telling me what to write. This is real. These forces, these characters, these traffic angels and guides, and these spirits, or whatever you want to call them, are telling me who they are, and they're writing themselves through me. So that was kind of like, I don't know, is it fiction, nonfiction? All I know is that they were telling me what they wanted me to do and explaining the story to me. And it started blending and blurring those lines between fiction and nonfiction, and I just kind of went with the flow.
I think that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Brownell, because that feeling of knowing that you are being guided, you are being supported, that you're not doing this alone. That's a very interesting process, because sometimes it could lead to us having a block because we are not sure. It seems that it's an unknown place, and then there are times when we surrender to it. Have you experienced that? How has that been in your experience?
Well, that's really what this last 12, 14 months in my life has kind of been. I was essentially, my landlord raised the rent where I was living so high that I went on this journey, and I still don't know where I'm going to end up. I'm kind of living this nomadic life, going from place to place. And I kept thinking, oh, I'm going to go here. And the universe wanted me to go over here. And so it's like, I kept watching all these things unfold. I was going to go to Italy for a year, and then they weren't even taking applications for visas. So that kind of went to hell. So then I thought, well, I can go for 3 months. I have to go somewhere else. I chose Tunisia. So I ended up going to Tunisia for 3.5 months. And the day after I get there, I meet a man. And then it was like 2 weeks later, I started writing this story from their point of view. And they're telling me, yes, Brownell, we had to hook you up with this person. This is a person you were supposed to meet. And you know how hard it was to take an American woman and introduce her, connect her to a British man in Tunisia. Like, the logistics were crazy. And so I was sitting there and I thought, all these things I thought I knew what I wanted, they kept knocking me down another path. And so now I'm in this total surrender place, like you're talking about. Like, okay, where do you all want me to go? What do you want me to do? And it's unsettling, but also kind of exciting and scary. And some days I feel like, wow, they're really telling me what they want me to do, and it's all good and I trust. And then some days I'm like, I'm not so sure, where are we today? So it's a totally different adventure than the whole goal setting, planning, knowing what I want. It's like, I just have to just see what they want me to do.
I love that. I love that you are not only exploring yourself internally, you're also exploring yourself geographically. You're
Right.
actually moving countries,
Moving
and that
country.
takes guts because it's not just the unknown in terms of the astral or the ethereal. You're also exploring the unknown in terms of that physical reality. So I think that's really really powerful. So I do want to commend you for that because it's this is the journey we've all come to, and it's unique for everybody depending on the themes that we've actually come to explore. But I'd love to know what led you to this place where you were so passionate about writing. Because I know that for me, I became passionate about writing because I come from a family of writers. And everybody
Oh,
kept saying, when are you going to write? When are you going to publish? And then I started writing. I did blogs initially and I published blogs and articles, but the actual publishing a book was a struggle for me. But I know that it is part of my DNA. So I've
yes.
always been inclined to it, especially because I was a stutterer as a child. So silence was more of my preferred space. So creatively, writing was something that I was, and reading books and writing was something that that really, really, I was inclined to, really attracted me. So, I'd love to know, Brownell, what is it that happened, or how was your experience in childhood and moving on to your teenage years and adulthood that really made you focus? This nothing is a coincidence. I think there's always that synchronicity that one thing leads to another and inclines us and aligns us. So I'd love to know what is it that led you to this place.
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't grow up in a family of writers necessarily, and not even necessarily a family of readers to that huge of a degree. So it wasn't like it was a big literary family. But I was a creative kid from the beginning. Did all kinds of things. I remember when I was high school, I used to take barrettes and paint little scenes on barrettes and sold them at a local store. So I loved creative stuff. And my undergrad degree was in advertising, which is, some people might laugh, but it's also a very creative field. So it was definitely a marketing, advertising kind of businessy orient on terms of creativity. I started writing kind of in a journal, I guess, and about 30 something years ago. And that was a great way for me to kind of open up that portal, if you will. But it wasn't really until I went through a really, really difficult time in 2005 and 2006. And I was just like, this has to be happening for a reason. It has to be happening for a reason. What's the reason? Like I was on a mission. I know, I don't know if you know Mark Manson, but he said happiness is solving problems. And all I knew is like, this has to be there has to be a why. There has to be a why. And that's what led me kind of in a meditative state. Oh, well, there are 5 reasons why bad things happen. And that's what led me to write my first book. So that one was like, I just got to share this with people because this is helping me get some more meaning out of what I was going through. And but it was, even though there was a lot of creativity in terms of, getting meditative and getting the downloads of what I should say, it wasn't the same as fiction, and so I thought I was just going to stay in the left brain nonfiction world until I started writing my first novel. And I wrote the first one, and it was just kind of a nice little love story. And then I wrote the second one and started getting into their past lives. And that's when it got fun, right? That's when my spark got turned on, how fun it is to write these reincarnation stories. Like I said, that's one of the reasons I started the podcast and want more of these stories out in the world, is because they're fun. There's so many of them, and there's so many ways to tell these stories. And so I just that's when I really got turned on to the whole idea of writing. And then this new trilogy, it's called We Meet Again. It was hard work to write because there's a mystery going through. It's kind of like a Da Vinci Code meets Outlander with reincarnation, right? So it's got like this huge mystery and everything, tying it all together. And I set myself up for a big challenge there, but it was just so much fun to delve into that and get into history. They go into 5 different lifetimes, going back to the Renaissance and then to the Middle Ages, and even back 2,000 years to Pythagoras, and like all these different things. And I just found it super really, fun way to do it. And I just think I've also seen through my readers that fiction can open up people's minds in a way that nonfiction can't. And they read the story, and they wouldn't pick up a nonfiction book on some of these topics, but they read a story, and they don't have to believe time travel to enjoy a time travel book. So they're reading these stories, and all of a sudden now they're starting to see, and I know you probably know what this is like, they start seeing that there's the truth there. Wait a minute, this is opening up a possibility. And so I guess that kind of is what really sparked me.
I love that journey. I love the journey. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Brownell, because it seems to me that you definitely came from a family where you might have felt odd. You might have felt that your inclinations were not particularly shared by many, and that on its own, it's a different kind of theme to actually explore, being different, and there. And sometimes I think that takes us to, it could take us up or down. But when it takes us up, it takes us to a place where we really come to accept ourselves, and we have the audacity to do things that nobody else is doing around us. So sometimes these things, I always love to hear where our guests come from, because you can always tell, because you're a very feisty, full of vitality, and audacious person. I could tell that from your energy. And, that comes from actually coming from that place where you definitely have had to stand up and believe in yourself, regardless. So, and you've gone up with it. You've actually explored the higher perspective. So that's what my book is about. Daily Soul Bytes for an Inspired Life. Daily Soul Bytes is really about, talking about the perspectives of different things, higher perspectives and lower perspectives. Intimacy has a higher perspective, which is about exploring, that connection to the higher self, and, becoming much more unconditionally loving in our relationships. And low perspectives of intimacy will be, things like feeling that, the more familiar you are, or the more familiar people are to you, the more they disrespect you. And, those kinds of perspectives, there's always a saying, that there are always sayings and conditionings around us that take us to a place where we're exploring shadow and not exactly getting that best outcome with ease and flow. Then you have the higher perspectives, the higher conditionings that really allow us to align and explore that particular aspect. Because there are 31 nuggets in the book, and each nugget is like intimacy, love, compassion, forgiveness. There are all these conditionings and thoughts and beliefs around this, all these different, I call them love bites, all these love bites. Or soul bites, rather, soul bites. These soul bites that really can take you into the higher self, or exploring the low, that lower physical ego self. And it's really about becoming much more familiar with the higher perspectives, the higher self perspective, so we can align to that, because we only align to what we're familiar with. And as we align, we come into that place of surrender, integration, and we can really come to experience that fourth density experience, reality, even as we walk, because sometimes there is this difference between the third density, the fourth density, and the fifth density. And the fifth density, I've come to believe, is when you go into spirit. But the third density and the fourth density, these are all frequency densities of the cycles per second at which we are vibrating. And this is really what Daily Soul Bytes is about. It's about encouraging us to, or inspiring us to move into those higher perspectives, those higher frequency of vibration. It's all about energy. So yes, I did want to just touch on that. But I'd love to know, because you mentioned how our marketing and advertising was something you actually were into before you began to write, which is very interesting because as an author, marketing, promoting, advertising is something that you definitely need to get your book out there into the world. So how have you found, because that's not a coincidence that you have that expertise, but it's about how we use it, and how have you found it? What has your experience been as an author, having that as a background, marketing and advertising as a background?
That's a great question. I guess, some of it is innate, right? And then some of it is I needed to hire somebody to tell me some of this new stuff, right? And I'm digging into some of these new techniques. So it's all this world of how marketing and advertising, especially with books, is a different world for me. Even though I have my other books, I didn't quite do much on marketing. So it's like, shame on me. It's like the doctor's kids are sick, or something. I'm not taking care of myself like I should. So in this time, I'm like, okay, no, I want to try to follow all the rules and do all the techniques to get it out there. And so what I think for me, the biggest thing that's been powerful has been doing so many things at once. It's kind of overwhelming me sometimes. But, I launched this Facebook group called Life is a Trip Reincarnation Stories. So everybody's invited to join that. And that I launched it a little over a year ago. It's already 11,000 people. So it's a pretty nice, nice and so lovely. The people are just so beautiful. And it's for sharing stories. Like I said, fictional or factual. Nobody's judging anybody. It's super open-minded. And I wanted to do that because I just thought these stories need to be out there. So when I took myself out of the equation, and yes, of course, I'm telling the group about my books and my stories, but it started becoming so much bigger than just about me. And then doing the podcast and having other people's stories so that we can celebrate. The more I celebrate other writers writing similar topics, I just think it's better energy overall, right? When you're talking about it all being energy. And so I'm almost kind of like, I really want people to love my books. And I also know that I can't control that, right? But I can get more stories out there. And if one of the other writers gets the call from Hollywood and it's not me, I'll still be super proud because I've done something like that. So having that and having the story, the end that I mentioned, and then the trilogy coming out kind of all together is a lot to deal with, but it also kind of rounds it all out because it's like, I'm not too focused on one thing and like, oh, buy my book, right? And by the way, the first book in the trilogy is for 99 cents. So it's an easy, entry price. But I also can kind of let that go and maybe just meet cool people like you. And maybe it'll turn into book sales. Maybe it'll just turn into people joining the podcast. Maybe it won't, and just kind of releasing that to the team, who's still active in my life, and just kind of see where it goes. So it's one part of me is doing like, here's the checklist of all the things I need to do. And the other part is just letting it go and enjoying it and putting the message out there and letting the wind take it where it goes. So it's kind of both.
I love that. I love that. Yes, it's a lot to do because you're being guided. I'd love to hear about your team. Would you like to talk about this? Is this a spiritual team or a physical team?
It's the spiritual team. It's the team that I was starting to write the story and I'm writing and it started out with the team of kind of 2 guides and 2 what I call traffic angels, and they're the logistics people, right? They're like, how do we get this American woman with this British man in Tunisia? It's very humorous. I've had like several people read the story and think that it could be a college course, this one 9,000 word story, which is really a trip. But they started telling me. And so that's when I'm like, okay, they're really real. And now the more I kind of communicate with them, there's so much more to it, what their purpose is. And it's also, as I'm writing it, I'm realizing they're not infallible. It's not like they know everything and they're perfect. They're going, well, wait a minute, we're trying to do this, but these humans are getting in the way. And how hard it is to get these people together. And we need to work with them. I think a lot of times, at least for me, it was like separation between, the guides and then me. It's like, no, we're all a team. Like I'm a team with them. And so I have to work with them and tell them what I think maybe they could do more for me, and vice versa. Like, and I have to sit back and listen and say, where do you all want me to go, and what do you want me to do today? So it's been such a process, because I always kind of thought guides, but I never really thought team. And the team is a big component of how it all works, at least in my recent exploration of it all. That's pretty cool.
Definitely. No, I also am supported by the Aldorians, who are 10th dimensional beings on the planet Aldor, as well as archangels. Do you know the names of your guides, or do you just feel the energy of them?
In the story, I decide it was very funny, because I had some people read the story and go, you should have named them. And I'm like, all I know is what they wanted me to name them. And so I have the two guides are X and Y, and the two traveling angels are Z1 and Z2. So I made it really, really simple. I think, that's really what I think they wanted me to write, because I kept trying to say, you can give me a name and I can use a name, and they're like, no, this is good. I haven't thought about it until you just asked me. Maybe it's because they want it to be relatable to anyone, and we can all have those names, right? As opposed to some more specific. Because I just kind of wrote what they told me to write.
Yes. And do you get the messages? Because I think this is part of the creative process. So it's really good for us to just talk a little bit about how we do get this, that inspiration. And it's really about intuition. It's about connecting to the heart. How do you hear, or do you see? How do you get those insights? How do they come to you?
That's a great question. Another one. I definitely hear. I'm definitely more clairaudient, or whatever they call that. I'm definitely hearing them. Sometimes it's like like if we weren't seeing each other, but I'm on the phone, I get messages like that. And very much an energy thing. Like, if I am doing what they want me to do, they reward me. I feel this burst of energy, this joy, and when I'm not, they're either crickets, or maybe the energy's not so good. And I kind of look at them like, I've used this before, but like border collies. Like, if I want to go down this path and they want me over here, they're going to keep knocking me in a certain direction. And, they'll let you keep going down the wrong way. But, if you're listening, you can go down the path they want you to. So I definitely will feel energy. And that some days it's like, okay, something's off, and I'm not focusing on what I should be focusing. And I'm sure you're like me. You probably have techniques, whether it's EFT or meditation or little things like, okay, I got to clear up this energy right now, because I'm focusing on something I shouldn't. And then sometimes we're supposed to be uncomfortable, because that's how we move, right?
Yes. And I think I love that, because this is about self-awareness and knowing that the ups and downs will come, no matter how much development or transmutation or ascension we go through. There will always be ups and downs, but we don't stay on the same line. We go higher each time, and we don't come down as low as we did before, because we are now having this toolbox that allows us to become more self-aware. So we're aware of that sensation, that drop in frequency. We're aware of the different thoughts and beliefs and sensations that are now unfolding in that reality, and we're able to pull it back and align to what we prefer. And that takes practice. It's actually a journey.
I hope everybody's listening to what you just said, because that's so important. Really, I just kind of want to punctuate what you just said, because it's really important. We think, we're going to, and we kind of do, like you said, go up a level, and we think, we're up the next level, and then we're not going to, that's it. And and it's like, no, each level has its own series of ups and downs, and it's always an expansion and an exploration process. And, if we're too comfortable, we might get knocked off that, that comfort level. And I know for me, like the landlord raising the rent and kicking me, kind of essentially kicking me out, led me to so many things that I wouldn't have tried and wouldn't have seen and wouldn't have explored. And The way my mind has expanded so much in this travel and writing these stories and getting this out there, I wouldn't have done if I had stayed in my comfort zone. So, but people don't necessarily think that. So and sometimes people think, like, if they're here, and let's say you've evolved to here, and for the listeners, I'm like, one hand is higher than the other, is that when you're down here, you can't even imagine the higher level. But when you've been at the higher level, you remember what it's like. So sometimes you think the next level is like, I've gotten there. I'm the highest level there is. And you're like, no. You get humbled a little bit to go to the next one. So I just wanted to kind of reinforce what you just said, because I just think that's a really important message.
Yeah, it's a realization that I came to, and it's something that I now support my clients with when I'm talking about emotional resilience, because that is what takes us through those loops. And so it's like we're peeling onions, it's like the healing continues, the trauma of the different personality constructs we have is ongoing. So we do, it's not like we have traumas from one lifetime. We've got traumas of and then it's not like we just had the traumas stop when we're 30. The traumas definitely go on and on and on. So it's something about us having that emotional resilience and being able to just to choose and align what is much more preferred, what is much more empowering for us. I would love to know more about your podcast and the message, because this podcast is related to your book, and it's almost like a mission. Daily Soul Bytes is a mission for me now, and I'd love to know more about what this means for you and what you do with it.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, of course, it's the Life is a Trip Reincarnation Stories. It's not an interview podcast, so it's not me interviewing or talking to people. Although, I might add some things where we can discuss with the writers some of their stories. It's mainly stories. So people have a story, whether it's fictional or factual. We cross a lot of genres, so we have a variety of different kinds of stories on there. Some people are professional writers, and they're sharing their stories, and some people are have never written, but they've got their own kind of experience that they want to share. And it's important, like with the group, it can be just somebody going, oh, yes, I have this past life memory, blah, blah, blah. With the podcast, it definitely is more of a story. Like it's a beginning, middle, and end. Here's let me tell you this story. And I really feel like the more these stories get out in the world, we can change the world. I think it's that powerful. And, with over 1.5 billion people on the planet believing reincarnation, there aren't enough stories, and there need to be more stories. So that's my mission. And yeah, some of them are mine. You can go listen to a couple of them that I've written, but I want to nurture talent. In fact, the podcast is on IMDb. I don't know if you know that, but the, Internet Movie Database. So writers and the actors who are reading the stories get credit on IMDb. So that's pretty a big deal for a lot of writers and actors. And it's just like showcasing talent and storytelling and, getting it out there. So that's kind of the mission.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'd love to know something about the stories. Would you be wanting to share any of these stories? Because so tell me again, so Life is a Trip of Reincarnation Stories.
Yes.
That's the title. So what does that mean? What does it really mean?
Well, it could be reincarnation. They can be afterlife. They can be, some of them are like, I've got somebody that's submitting a story that is, somebody's got a zombie story, but I'll leave that up to, it's not a horror story because that's the one genre we don't really want to go into. Somebody's writing a comedy about ghosts. So we want to keep it open. Some of the stories are heart-wrenching. There's one that I wrote, it's called Justine, if you want to listen to it. And it's about a very troubled teen girl that is grappling with the loss of her parents from many, many years earlier and the adoption and not feeling like she fits in the world. And what was so powerful about that to me is that it was written as a short film script. So I had a group of actors reading the parts that you'll hear when you listen to it. And there were 2 actors that did the reading, and they came to me and said, "This is my story. You don't understand how important this story is. This is my story." And the fact that it could be written by somebody else and packaged by somebody else so they don't have to be that transparent in their life was helpful to them. But they were like, this is important. You've got to write this the right way. This is, and we did a recording, and then they came back to me and said, we want to edit this because we want to come back and do it again because this is just that important to us. So, there's that. And then another one I wrote that's kind of a comedy about a couple having couple issues, and they find out the past life. And I'll kind of leave that there. A friend of mine, he's an accomplished screenwriter, and he's written a lot of sci-fi scripts. And I went to him and I said, I want you to submit something to the reincarnation. He's like, I've never written about that before. And I said, yeah, but just give it a try. If you can write time travel, you can write this. And he said never in his life has he sat down at the keyboard and written the story all the way through one sitting without any editing, any obstacles or any, interruptions or anything. He just wrote the story. And I'd like to think that was something, some force somewhere nudging him, into our world and to write more of these stories. And, I always say to people, it doesn't matter to me if you believe in reincarnation or not. That's not really the purpose. The purpose is to expand people's minds. And, I know this with reincarnation. Generally, we come back as lots of different options, right? So we can be male or female, or maybe non-binary. We can be different nationalities, different religions, different races. And all of a sudden, when you realize that you've kind of crossed all over those lines, then the whole idea of racism or nationalism or any of that stuff is just kind of ridiculous, right? Because your previous lifetime, you might have been in one category that, maybe your family grew up and said, oh, well, we won't want to be that or whatever. And you're like, yeah, I think I might have been that in my previous lifetime. So it's just about entertaining people and sharing stories and opening minds and hearts and nurturing talent, I guess. That's probably the goal.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And it's interesting because I would love you to define what reincarnation means to you. Because there are some who believe that reincarnation doesn't exist. There's some who believe that reincarnation is really about going from one lifetime to another in a linear perspective. From one lifetime, you die and then you pass into another lifetime. And then there's some who believe that reincarnation is really about the same time. There's this present time, and it's all these lifetimes exist at the same time, simultaneously. So it's really about consciousness going from one across. It's not linear, across different, it's almost like, it's not even cyclical. It's simultaneous timelines occurring at the same time. And it's consciousness that is jumping through the different timelines to actually create experiences that seem like linear perspectives in our own 3D reality. How do you see reincarnation?
I love looking at it from a lot of perspectives. In fact, that's really the open thing that in my group, when somebody comes and says, this is the way it works, and I'm going to, tell you and everything. I'm like, maybe that might work to you. Let's not judge other people's points of view on it. So I'm super open to all the different perspectives. Personally, I kind of have two answers as far as how I believe. One is that as far as whether it's happening at once or whether we can go back and forth in time, our future life could be back in time. I don't know about that. The only thing that I do feel pretty strongly about is that there is a sequence. There is a past, present, and future. Because if there wasn't a sequence, there wouldn't be progress. Right? You have to have kind of before and after, right? So for me to know that, okay, I learned something in this experience, and I, like where we're talking about growing up and evolving to higher levels, that's not possible unless there's a past, right? So that's the only thing. In fact, I used to go to the physics lectures when I lived in Aspen. They'd get the Nobel Prize winning physicists would give us free talks, which was just such a gift. And I remember there was a talk on time and the concept of time. And I was talking to a leading physicist, and I said, yeah, but there's still a sequence. And it was funny because, he kind of gave me a double take on it because, Einstein talked about, okay, he kind of says there's no time, but he's really talking about the measurement of time, because pretty much all physicists believe in a big bang, which means there was something that started and now we're here, right? That shows some, and the universe is expanding. So there's some idea of that. And so that's something that matters to me, because it adds the dimension of the fact that this is happening for a reason. We're here for a reason. We're growing and learning and evolving for a reason. And if you take away the idea of sequence, then I don't know how you keep the purpose and the meaning and the growth and the transformation part of it within that. So that's just a personal thing. As far as just a more general idea, I personally believe that we have a soul. That soul existed before this lifetime and will exist after this lifetime. And that soul chooses a body and becomes you for the lifetime. And so I do believe there's time in between lifetimes for us to go. I love the Michael Newton. I don't know if you know Michael Newton's books, but he talks a lot about what happens, upstairs. As I say, like, my team is upstairs. I think that is one of the most fascinating things to me, is like what goes on when we're not here. And I do believe part of our soul is still kind of upstairs, even while part of us is here. But doing that exploration of what do we do when we're not here and how all that works, to me is just as exciting as, past life is this or past life is that. I wrote a children's book. I have two of them. I've got one specifically on reincarnation, and then one just kind of on the meaning of life. And, one of the verses I like, it says, we decide on our lessons, the paths we will take, awards we might go for, and mistakes we might make. For life isn't easy and not always fun, but easy is boring, like games always won. So we set up our challenges and mountains so high to test our endurance and reach for the sky. It doesn't much matter if we get to the top. What matters much more is what we do when we stop. So that's just a little, few verses from that story, but I really think that's, kind of encapsulates the answer to your question.
Oh, I love that. I love that poem. Very, very beautiful. And I do agree with you about the sequence, because there is the need for us to make sense of all the experience and the sequence, that sequence of, even as consciousness moves through, whether it's a linear perspective or a simultaneous perspective, there needs to be something that makes sense to us, and that sequence is something that would make sense. So we are, even if we're creating the past from the present, it has
Right.
to make sense, and even if we're creating the future from the present, there has to be a sequence. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Mike, this has been a really wonderful conversation, Brownell.
I've loved it. Yeah.
Where can people find you again? You've mentioned your group and your Facebook group and the YouTube. So just give us the names again of where people can find you. Okay.
Well, first thing is, my name is Brownell Landrum. So Brownell is Brownell. Last name Landrum, Landrum. I'm the only Brownell Landrum in the world, so it's pretty easy to find me. And then, so you can Google me, find my website. That's where you can download the stories, that kind of thing. And then the Life is a Trip podcast, Google Life is a Trip Reincarnation. There are a couple other Life is a Trip podcasts. So if you just type in Life is a Trip Reincarnation, go to Facebook, join our group. We'd love to have you, and we'd love to share stories and ask questions and delve into some of these topics that you're talking about in our group. And then you'll see me, you see me on Amazon and BookBub and, all the major sites. I'm not as active on TikTok and Instagram as I plan to be, but I'll get there. But yeah, just seek me out. And we have a YouTube channel, all of this kind of stuff. So I'm just happy to hear from people and share stories. And if somebody has a story they want to submit, generally the short stories are about 1,000 to 3,000 words. So that's kind of the parameter, but just let's commune.
I really appreciated you spelling it out, because this is really for the benefit of those who are listening as opposed to those who are watching. So thank you for that. And I do want to say that it's never too much to plug and plug, because people need a lot of reminders the mind is so distracted, and we cannot we may not believe how many times a reader needs to really see our promotion before they actually buy the book. It's not 10 times, it's over 20 times.
I think
So
you're right.
one must not be reluctant to plug. So I always say plug away, do not, because there's sometimes a resistance, being a writer and being, promoting our books. It's another journey. It's an entirely, you can write a book and just share with friends and family. You can just have it on your website, or you can just, you can have a podcast about it. That's another level. Or even have it on IMDb as you have. That's another level. Or turn it into a film or a cartoon. That's another level. So it's about us really feeling no resistance to plug and to share and to promote what we are creating. There is a purpose. There's a message that, like your message about, reincarnation, about really enjoying that flow, enjoying the creativity, enjoying the nonfiction, the fiction, enjoying life, allowing life and synchronicities of life to really show you where to go. And so I would encourage our audience to really get your books and join your groups, and and I'm already subscribed to your YouTube channel. So I look forward to enjoying that even more now that I've met you. So thank you for joining me today, Brownell.
Thank you.
And I do want to thank our audience for joining us today, and to also invite you to get Daily Soul Bytes. This is available anywhere books are sold now, and it's in paperback, it's on Kindle, and it's also in audiobook format, published by Barbara Press Division of A House. So that's something that I'm really passionate about, and also asking you to subscribe if you haven't, to the Daily Soul Bytes Show. New episodes every Wednesday, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daily Soul Bytes Show. Bye-bye.